Hey, y'all, it's Timothy from the Midnight Wiki. So I've been wanting to interview Tim and Tyler for the site for quite some time now. And with this month marking 10 years since the band formed and 10 years of Days of Thunder, it felt like the perfect time. I reached out to their management back in April, and they suggested that we go ahead and do the interview then, since Tim and Tyler's schedules will both be busy leading up to and during the summer. So keep in mind this was recorded back in April, but we decided to wait and release it this month to coincide with the 10-year anniversary. This is one of the longest interviews the Midnight has ever done, and we dove deep into the nitty-gritty and talked about several things that had never been talked about before. Also, I will note that I had a little bit of a cold during the interview, and some say that my accent can be a little strong, so closed captions have been included for your convenience. Thank you for watching, and thanks for your continued support of the Midnight Wiki. I'm Timothy Collins on behalf of the Midnight Wiki, coming to you from the Midnight Wiki headquarters, aka my bedroom here in Abbeville, South Carolina. So just first, we're here to celebrate 10 years of Days of Thunder. It's really crazy that y'all have hit this point. Like, just first of all, what does it feel like to have been doing this for over 10 years now?
Well, I look at myself and I see a lot of more gray hairs, so I guess that's what it feels like. What do you think, Tyler?
Yeah, I feel the same. It's like a different person wrote those songs.
I was just gonna say it really is. You know, it's been a while. It's been so long. I mean, it's been 12 years since we met. 12 years, actually.
Yeah,
almost to the day. It was April 2012, I think it was.
Mm-hmm. You know? April 14th. Yeah.
Oh, you have the date? Oh, that's cool. I didn't even know that. But you are a different person, right? You know, our lives have, in many ways, completely changed, and obviously, fundamentally, we're the same people. But yeah, Tyler is married and has a kid, and owns a house.
And Tim no longer lives in Denmark. Yeah. No, Tim no longer lives in Denmark. This
is true.
Now you have a green card, and you have, it's a whole system.
It really is amazing, with lots of challenges, but also lots of growth and lots of incredible, beautiful experiences.
Awesome. That's so awesome. So before we kind of dive in, what are you guys currently up to? What are you working on as of this very moment?
Very moments?
Yeah.
I'm unpacking my I haven't got to set up my studio today. I moved this weekend, so I have been unpacking my chaotic life into my new 2-bedroom apartment. So that's what I'm up to.
Yeah. You, Tyler?
Timothy,
are you still recovering from that long ass journey you went on? I didn't think you were ever going to come home. I honestly thought you want to stay over there. I was like, man, when is this guy ever coming home? Like, it seems like every week, new destination. I was like, this when you become such an exotic traveler.
He's a Jetson. Let's just face it. He's a Jetson.
I had a moment where I was like, stop posting. I was like, keep all the goods for yourself, and don't bother Instagram with like being in cool places. So it was nice. I had to make a conscious choice to save the cool moments for myself. But when I got home, I've been writing a lot. We're still in the secret lair, living here, Timothy, and probably will be until after the European tour. So my ability to kind of have my vocal chain and have my toys and synthesizers, all that's gone. But I'm still writing. I've got my Rhodes set up over there. I was writing earlier this morning. So just making the words rhyme, like always.
You guys seem to have a knack for writing and making music no matter the situation, whether you have a big, nice, fancy studio in LA that a lot of famous producers are using, whether you're crammed into a tiny room or in the back of a tour bus, monsters, that's just, you guys are just good at doing it. So what can I say? So,
thank you. Yeah. You do what you can with what you got,
Right. Exactly. So I just kind of want to talk about sort of like y'all's career so far as the Midnight and like era. So like way back from 2012 to where you guys are now. Probably not talk about the process quite as much because I feel like that's been really well documented in other interviews y'all have done, other podcasts y'all have done. So just sort of to try to think back to your mindset, what was going on at this point in your careers at the Midnight.
And so, like, let's go back to that day in 2012 on April. Like, who arranged that meeting? Who made that happen? Who decided that these two guys should see each other?
Katie Donovan was her maiden name. I forget what her married name is, but that was I was hoping to get signed to EMI, and it never happened. EMI was purchased and dissolved before that happened, but it was an email, and Tim and I connected in a studio. Who owned that studio, Tim?
In the studio that I was working, that was Raphael Sadiq.
Raphael Sadiq, that's right.
Yeah, who was the team I was signed to at the time. They were renting a room. It's in North Hollywood in Los Angeles, California, and it was a great little studio right next to the building where I lived at the time. And so we met. I remember coming down from the apartment I was staying in at the time and checking out Tyler. I remember Katie had said his lyrics are really great, and I'm always on the lookout for good lyricists. And so I found his Bandcamp and just played a song called "Things Are Better" from the album that had just come out. And
great song.
Great song. And it gave me feelings of sort of early James Taylor, and I could hear all the influences, and I just felt right at home already immediately. And so I went to myself, well, this is going to be a fun day, because you never know it's kind of like a songwriting blind date. You kind of go in with a stranger, and usually you try and write something for others. Usually if you're just songwriters, you're trying to play songs with other artists. Knowing that Tyler was also an artist and kind of being at the cusp of discovering that I had an inner artist myself that I kind of wanted to express, I just thought, I remember saying to you, Tyler, why don't we just write something instead of going, Britney's looking for songs, Christina Aguilera's looking for up-tempo, that's always kind of the briefs. And we said, let's just write something. I played some chords on the piano, and after a couple of minutes, I was playing the chords that ended up becoming "We Move Forward," and Tyler started writing. He said, "I like that," and I put it on a loop, and that was kind of the beginning of it.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah, it's just, "We Move Forward" was the first song I had ever heard by you guys in 2016, but I actually didn't hear that version first. I heard a remix of it first, but we'll talk more about that a little bit later. So after that first meeting, like, how often were you guys seeing each other? Were you like, this is great, let's just keep doing this? And like, how often did you guys see each other and continue to write after that first meeting back in April 2012?
Well,
Did we? I don't think
you went back to Denmark.
I went back. I feel like
it was
we
a
just
long
saw
time.
each other that once before I went back, right? Because I was in. So hush hush, don't tell the immigration, don't tell the authorities. I was over here for 3 months. It's called a tourist visa. You're not allowed to work, but I did have a session with this young man sitting in front of us. And I had to go home to Denmark after those 3 months. And then I was applying for a visa. And that took 4 months. That was a long time. And I didn't know if it was going to go through. And I was desperately trying to get to LA, and I wanted to be here. And I was so ready to leave Denmark because it's a small country, and it just really there wasn't really space for me, I found. And so I went back, and I don't think it was until I came back in October, I don't know, November, something like that, that we convened. I remember coming back to LA, and Tyler said he was playing at a show at Hotel Cafe in Hollywood, and I went to see him there, and I think we met up. You lived in Santa Monica, and I lived in North Hollywood, which is, for those who don't know LA, is quite a drive. LA is a big sprawling area, huge. You can drive on the freeway for 2 hours and still be in the city. It's weird like that. And so it wasn't, we weren't meeting up every week because schedules didn't allow it. But when we did meet, it was like for me at least, it was sort of a release of being able to kind of express sides of me I couldn't doing top 40 pop music. I have the dates actually, Timothy. Oh my God.
Because Tim had a different email address. Yeah, wow, this is so fun. Yes, October.
Right.
October 30th, 2012, you came to Hotel Cafe. That's right. And then January of 2013, you put together Gloria. Wow.
That's right.
We started the day in the studio was 8/12/12, and then it was finally close enough to share as a demo that January of 2013.
Yeah. Did we not? I remember it as we moved forward that first day in April 2012, but also that we started on the chorus for Gloria, that you had that chorus. I feel like I remember playing those chords on the synth and singing Gloria over those, because I changed the chord. I said, do you mind if I change the chorus? You said, go nuts.
Yeah.
I thought we had, because it was like sitting as a demo with just the chorus for like a year or maybe until January. Was that, or did we finish it in November?
I think it was finished in spring of 2013, but let's see.
That's right. That's right.
There was a demo placed down in August, because that's one of the demos that we got in the 2020 ARG, one of the prizes, when you guys gave us like those 12 demos, and that was the date that was on. It was August 12th, 2012. So
August 12th. So did it have the verses?
yeah, it did, but some of the lyrics were changed. It said, I was like, I've been out of my mind with grief.
Yeah.
One of the lyrics that changed.
Maybe you did do that. Maybe you did. I never remember we went back and tweaked it and changed it, but I remembered it as if we only had the chorus for like a long time.
Remember I think it was just scratch vocals that we did at Blakesley, and then we went to Mad Dog in Burbank and recorded the
did the years. We recorded the years, or wrote the years that day. I remember, because we were talking about what we should call the song, and then we were saying maybe we should be called The Years, and then you mentioned the search engine optimization and SEO and
right.
We were kind of we didn't have a name until we in 2014, before when we had to upload the first EP. I think we realized we don't have a name. We had to open a Twitter account and a Bandcamp, and we were like, well, we got to figure something out. We looked at our notes and ended up settling on the Midnight. But yeah, you're right. Is that like January of 2013? Was that Mad Dog Studios?
Yes, that's right.
Wow, I can't believe it took so, because then that was a couple of songs, but then I guess I spent another year really dialing in what we were, because at that time that's why We Move Forward sounds much more like progressive house, because I was listening to a lot of that stuff at the time, and I ended up pivoting in it a little bit and kind of changing some drum sounds and adding a different bass that we now hear now, and we were kind of finding out what it was.
Yeah. We also tried another song called You Give Me. Yeah, you give me a song to sing.
Right. Yeah.
That was in 2013. So that was one of the first 3 or 4 songs that we worked on. Yeah. There was a track called Ocean Drive. I forget what that became.
Oh my God. I know I did a track, I can't remember what it. Yeah. I mean, at that time, 2012, I had become newly single and had moved to California. And so had then just discovered the year before, had seen Drive and had discovered synthwave, Time Cop, Future Cop, Miami Nights, all that stuff, and was just so NPM soundtracks as well. There was such a feeling of nostalgia that I was like, I couldn't put a finger on, and I was so deep, it just moved me, and I wanted to express something like that. It was very second nature to me, because it was the language I grew up hearing and speaking musically,
And I think a lot of us have had that feeling when we discovered synthwave. This was a genre that we didn't know we needed. It was just like, it touched you, it hits you in your feels so much, and it's just like, we knew we would probably like this kind of music. We just didn't know this kind of music had a name. And so when you find it and discover it, and you discover all these other artists who are making this music, that's just the most amazing thing ever. And that's just so what the beauty of this genre is. And I know for a lot of people, y'all were the first people to put us in that spectrum, in that realm of what synthwave is. So
It's cool.
We feel blessed to be on the ride, and we don't feel in control of it at all.
No.
And so you're working on demos, and as I like to say at this point in your career, Tim, I feel like in 2013 you were in your SoundCloud era. In the beginning, there was SoundCloud and there were blockheads. Do you know what I'm talking about?
No, I don't know what's blockhead.
New Kids on the Block fans.
Oh, gotcha. Yeah, 2013. Because the team I was signed to, they produced and co-wrote a lot of it, like half of that album. The album, I think it's called 10.
It was 10. I had that album in 2013.
Oh, wow.
And I listened to the album, and I did not have any clue who you were at the time.
No.
But I remember you wrote that song, Wasted on You, which is such a great song. Such a great power ballad song. But some of the first people to know about y'all's project and what y'all were doing were New Kids on the Block fans, Donnie Wahlberg fans.
I never thought about that. You're right, because of that, because of Donnie and guys from the band tweeting and name dropping us, and I got some followers on Twitter, and I don't even know if I was on Instagram at that time, but anyway, they, when I would tweet out a demo or For the Years or Glory or whatever we put on SoundCloud, it would be a lot of those people that they were my followers. And there's one follower who's such as sweet as can be. Her name is Mary, and she still follows us on Twitter. I've met her at shows, and she's a gem. And she's a diehard New Kids fan, but she's hopped over to the Midnight too.
I just feel like that's such a cool footnote to be like, well, this kind of started sort of, with New Kids on the Block in a way.
It all comes back to New Kids on the Block. All of it, life.
They're pretty awesome, I must say. And so I actually discovered what I just talked to you about very recently. I was going down a rabbit hole of searching through old Twitter posts because, your old handle, I Am Data, is no longer active on Twitter. Yeah. You threw that into the sun many years ago. And
it's dead, or I think I deleted it because I wasn't using...
It's gone. It's dead. But the thing is, some of those tweets still live on a little site I use often called the Internet Archive. So... And we will cut this out if you want to, but I found something that you probably didn't know was still on the internet. So around this time, you covered a song by Keith Urban called Cop Car, and
oh my God, yeah. Wait, is that there? Because
I'll tell you how I found it. So on the Internet Archive, you can search for URLs by prefix. So I could just put in, for example, soundcloud.com/iamdata/*, and it'll come up with every link that they ever archived that started with that. Wow. And they didn't have many of you, but that was one of them. And the link was dead. They don't archive sounds like that, or
okay.
They were probably still using maybe Flash Player or something at the time. So that stuff doesn't get archived, but I Googled it and it was on some random MP3 site. And I downloaded it, I listened to it, and that was
you were able to find it. Wow.
Yeah, that's you. I was like, I heard it like that. That's him singing this Keith Urban song. And
I would love to hear that if you can send it to me or send it to Justin or something, because I would love to hear that, because I don't have a copy of that. It was made on a laptop that was 2 generations ago. This is 12 years ago, 10 years ago. And so I didn't even have a copy of that. I would love to hear that. Are you able to send that to Justin or something?
Absolutely, absolutely, I will. Because I don't know if you're going to be like, no, don't let anyone listen to that, or you'd be like, oh, I would love to hear that again. So
yeah, it's a great song. I was just inspired by it, and I was going through something at the time, and I think I spent a week on laying that down. Yeah, I love that.
And that just shows you the extreme measures I go to find things.
I love that. I love
about the Midnight. It's out there if you look hard enough. And so, you released Days of Thunder. I have some pictures to show you because I don't know how to put pictures on my screen, so we're just going to do this with my iPad. Do you remember taking this photo?
I remember that photo. We had just had breakfast at a spot in central LA. I forget what it's called, but I think it's still there. It was like this, it's a coffee shop cafe, and they did breakfast, and it's kind of a homey, woodsy place. Near kind of central LA, near Wilshire Boulevard, I think, kind of central. I forget what it's called, but I think it still exists. Anyway, Tyler was in LA for 4 days or whatever. Oh my God, That was taken outside of Blakesley. That's the wall of Blakesley Studios that Raphael Sadiq still owns. Yeah.
And I found this one on Twitter when I was doing this to SoundCloud discovery mission. Was this one? Someone tweeted this out the day that Days of Thunder was released.
Yeah.
You know, and it's just I had never seen this photo before until then.
That's from the studio.
Yeah, and just a little trip
cool. Are they framed, Timothy? Did you frame them?
It's my iPad.
Oh, it's your iPad. Oh, gotcha. Good. That's so cool.
Yeah. Like I said, I don't know how to put me fancy and like show you pictures on my screen, so I'm just doing it that way. That's just the easiest thing to do. So how did it feel like when you hit send on Days of Thunder? It was out on not SoundCloud, Bandcamp, out into the world. How did that feel for both of you?
You want to start, Tyler? How'd you feel?
It felt cool. I feel like, and probably for Tim too. I mean, the first, call it 2.5 years, we were just throwing stuff against the wall. We didn't, there weren't any grand plans, and it really wasn't until late 2013, early 2014 that like the other songs kind of took shape. Yeah. And in 2014, it felt like, oh, this is like we're gonna cram and we're gonna release it. Like it was 3 years of trickling in, and then it was kind of 1 year of release. And then I mean, from my end, I didn't know what it was, so I didn't have any thoughts around it except like we made a cool, 5-6 song. It was 6 songs, right?
I think so. Yeah, 6 songs. Yeah.
It just felt like a cool encapsulation of 3 years worth of co-writes in a specific direction. Yeah.
I think you didn't have quite the same intimate relationship to the track, because I was the one had sat with it for so long, and the way we had worked, we're trying to change this so we can be more productive and less, it's been in the past, it's been very much like Tyler will write some stuff and then I'll sit with it for a long time. And obviously that can be a problem when thing grows and I end up just bottlenecking everything. But in the beginning, there was no deadline. No one knew that thing was coming. So we wrote these songs over a period of maybe a year and a half or something. I was, tinkering with it and fiddling with it and figuring out what it was. And so I remember really spending a long time trying to figure out what the sound was so that at least there was a direction and it had an identity. And so when it came out, I don't think any of us have had any expectations really. It was more like, oh, this is cool. We did a thing. We made this thing that we both think is cool and fun. And now we can just put it out. Like, isn't that freeing? I remember thinking, because coming from the major label world where it's just a bigger machine and you're kind of beholden to other people, it was just like, well, we'll just make it right and we'll put it up online. And I remember I was in Denmark. We published it on Bandcamp, and then I had to go home to Denmark. I was going home on holiday, and then I ended up losing my passport. And because the passport is connected, your visa is in the literally physically stamped in your passport. I lost my passport, and I had to apply for visa again this is 2 years later in Copenhagen. I couldn't just get a new copy of the passport. I had to apply for a visa again. So I was home for 4 months. And as I was home, I remember suddenly seeing in my inbox, we had a midnight email, just hundreds of Bandcamp notifications of buying. And I was texting Ty, I was like, have you seen what's happening? And I saw on Twitter, someone was tweeting at us like, I remember asking the internet, like, what's going on? And somehow I had made videos for in iMovie for Days of Thunder, Gloria, and Kick Drums and Red Wine, using all these old clips and stuff. And the video for Days of Thunder had made it on the front page of the Outrun forum on Reddit. And we were both like, wow, that's cool. And it started like, oh, we've got 800 views. Wow. Like now it's at 2,000. Now it's at 8,000 views, and it kept going up. And suddenly we were like at 25,000, and it was just, it wasn't like we're like, we made it, we're blowing up. You know, it's still on a small scale, but I think it's sense that people's response to this was very visceral and immediate, and we were just like, this is just really amazing to see suddenly this sort of connection and this dialogue happening. That was the beginning, as I remember it.
Mm-hmm. I didn't really pay attention much to the metrics until you pressed release on Endless Summer. It was 2016. I knew that we'd had a couple moments on the Outrun subreddit, but it really didn't feel like a massive movement until Endless Summer. And I remember going in, you pressed publish on Bandcamp, and I went to see Cool Runnings at a like a dine-in theater in Bushwick, Brooklyn, called Syndicated. And I know. And then when I got out 2.5 hours later, like we'd made like $1,000, which was more money than either of us could have imagined. You know?
More money than we've had ever seen at that point in our life.
Just rolling in the dough, just like
that's right.
I remember taking a bath in my money that day. It was great. I just in my big tub of money.
That's, I mean, honestly, these numbers are they were probably in the 5 digits, but like it was enough. Like my wife and I were trying to figure out how to buy a house in Atlanta, and it was, you know, like that little bit of cash like allowed us to help put a down payment on a house in 2016. Like that was definitely part of it. So you know, that felt like a huge deal. Like it felt like, oh, this is the new thing.
I remember you texting me. I think it was after we had done it. I think we had only released Days of Thunder, the EP. And I remember you texting me, this must have been 2015. You texting me maybe a year later, 10 months later, going, I was walking my dog in West Hollywood where I was living at the time. And you texted me, hey, you know, how's it going? You know, we should really write some more songs. Those songs are. I was listening to the EP, and it's still pretty good. You know, it was one of those. And I could tell that obviously you, like I was saying, you hadn't been as ingrained in the tracks and in this world. You know, I was coming from this place of just, I need to express this side of me, and Tyler was more coming it from what I understand, like this is freeing and fun, and why don't we do more of this? And I was like, well, yeah. Like I remember reading your text, I was like, duh, we're gonna do more, duh. And but then it was really, I had moved to a different studio. I remember you coming to LA in 2015. I'm guessing it was like what, February, March or something. We wrote Endless Summer and Vampires in that studio in North Hollywood. It was called Thud Studios.
I remember that one.
Wow. In the wall spot, but that, I don't know if it was the same day, but I had the demo that was like basically just the chords and the sax, the kind of a sax sample that I had designed into that melody from an old song I wrote with another guy years ago before that. And I had come up with that sax piece. And I said to Tyler, you want to write something with this? And he's like, sure. And I remember with Vampires, and this kind of will tell you a little bit of our process and how visual we were thinking. We were both kind of thinking, what's the chorus for this song? Tyler written verses, and then we've got this sax hook, and we were like, is that enough? And I remember you going, you're writing, and you're sitting there, and you go, I'm just fiddling with the track, and you go, I've got it. It's called Vampires, and it's about you know the blood-sucking, sort of soul-sucking life of the sort of Patrick Batemans of the world in Upper East Side, New York in the 80s. And I just remember going, that's sick. That title, with that title, I said, we don't need a chorus. Like that's the hook. It's Vampires. It's like it's like a stock statement. It's confident that here's the drop. For some reason it kind of fell into place for me, and I think that was where some of those ideas of starting to push the envelope. I wanted to push the envelope a little further sonically and kind of in the arrangements on Endless Summer, I think. Lonely City is another example of something feeling maybe a little contemporary. I very deliberate for Days of Thunder. It was very gentle side chaining. If anyone knows what that is, essentially where you're ducking some elements where to leave room for another element like a kick drum or something. So it kind of makes it pump and feel tighter and bigger. I remember being very cautious about that on the first EP, because I wanted to keep that element of sort of innocence and what it sounded like back then, and then slowly import some of those elements as we grew.
Yep. And then Sunset was written in late 2015, early 2016.
Yeah.
Jason was written before that, I think.
It was, yeah.
Wow. I remember Dia Frampton was looking for songs. She signed a network, and I sent her an early demo of Sunset, and I was like, I don't know, I think we might use it, but like, if this seems like a, and I remember her being like, it's cool, but it's not, I don't.
Well, I'm glad you didn't sell our biggest song to Dia Frampton.
I know. I know. I love Dia. But I remember that. I mean, and that just kind of goes to show that like the Midnight wasn't a solid like entity in my brain in the same kind of way that it was after Endless Summer. Like after Endless Summer, that was like, oh yeah, this
could be a thing. Kind of thing.
This is our new job. It felt like, or a new side adventure at least. But it was, nocturnal, and then the shows around that. 2017 was really like that. Okay, here we are. We're off to the races.
That show at the DNA Lounge in. Do you remember the date? It was like the 12th or July of 2017 or.
Yeah, it was. I think the 14th of July.
14th
of the 12th.
Right.
Yeah.
That sounds right. 14th. Yeah, I just remember there he is. There he's got the slideshow going. And a little, we've probably said this, but Tyler's guitar wasn't even plugged in because we didn't have the capability. We didn't know what we were doing.
It was plugged in. It was just turned down, so you mostly couldn't hear it.
I thought it was like
mostly.
We couldn't plug it in because they weren't set up for it, and it was like. We don't have we didn't have a tour manager to give them an advance of the equipment we needed. Like none of that existed,
That's true. Yeah. That's all very true. Yeah, I think I was plugged directly into the board, which meant that there was no amp, there was no effects.
Oh my god! I remember having the sound card on stage. I could my UAD sound card. I was turning it up and down on stage. It was just like complete bush league.
No click. Jesse Molloy was playing to no click.
Trying
to figure out when to go back in. Yeah.
You remember the sax solo in Vampires, Timothy, where the drums drop out. It's very floaty, and there's sax solo, and we played that. And as we were playing it, we realized we didn't have in-ears. What's called little monitors, like little earplugs that have speakers in them. That's how we
played that first show without IEMs. I don't even think I realized that. That's crazy.
Oh yeah, completely. We had, just monitors on stage, but we didn't have any way to know where we were in the song, because once the drums dropped out, there was no, way to kind of stay in locked into the groove. And we and Jesse was out there working the crowd, and looked back at it. He was completely lost, and we were like, we didn't know where we were either. And he just had to chance it and come in when he thought it was, and it worked out. But I mean, we've been allowed so much grace from the fan base from minute one. It's pretty incredible. Yeah.
And what's so great about that first show is that it is available to watch in full on the Internet Archive.
I know. I found it. I found it, and it was immediately traumatizing once again.
But that's the thing, like you had to start somewhere with the live shows. I mean, you just had to do it. And what made you guys decide to, okay, we want to try to put this music on a stage? Because this kind of music is very hard to do on a stage if the goal is to try to be authentic in terms of instruments and stuff. Because some of the stuff you just physically can't play, like, on a keyboard. You just can't. And so, like, what made you decide to bring the Midnight to the stage? And then, like, how did you decide, like, how to play those songs live?
Well, we're still trying to figure out how to play those songs live.
An ongoing thing. You're right. Totally. It's how much of it should stay in that electronic space, and how do you translate that into a more live experience that feels a bit more spontaneous and like you've got actual live musicians executing this. And you're right, some of these things can't be played and maybe shouldn't be played, but they need to be typed, so they got to be on track, and then you have to layer other things that make it come to life in a different way. It's still a challenge.
There are so many elements. I remember the first 20 or 30 shows, so much was in the tracks, and you know, Tim and I were playing what we could, but Tim is a drummer mainly, but I'm mostly a singer. You know, I play guitar to back me up, but the midnight parts were like far beyond my capacity. And the first couple of years, it just felt like I called it midnight karaoke a time or two. It was like, oh, I'm just singing to the backing track. But it was really with Lilia and then the addition of Royce that it felt like a live band. I feel like it should be a hybrid synth rock EDM experience. I think in its essence that's what people want. They want elements of the ripping guitar solo and the sax solo and the sung ballads, and they also want kind of the purity of the kick drum and the bass that's untouched. You know, if you play it, it's so
and those things.
That's right.
Good way of putting it. Yeah, that's exactly right. It's a challenging thing.
What are you going to say, Tyler?
No, no matter how you do it, there's always trade-offs, and we're still trying to kind of find that Goldilocks set, and you know, I can musical direct a folk, you know, band, but the idea of like really doing a 5,000 cap room justice to provide the show that people want to see. It's a really, like, there are a lot of trade-offs that have to happen, but we're working on it.
And so, like, and who was the one that said, like, you guys should try to play live, or like, we want you guys to perform live?
It was more management, I think.
Well, it was what made us play the DNA Lounge was this guy. His name is Devin. I forget his last name, but he was the one that was organizing these sort of, I think it was like a synthwave night at the DNA Lounge in San Francisco. He had been messaging us, or me, since I ran the socials at that time, on Facebook for a while, and kind of said, you know, could we bring you to play here? And we had never played a show live as the Midnight, and so we kept going. We don't really, you know, the money he could offer us, understandably so, wasn't really enough to justify flying Tyler to California and going up to San Francisco and putting
rehearsals and Jesse,
and we didn't have a sax player. It was actually the week before the show. A friend of mine said, like, I have this guy, he plays with Panic at the Disco. He's great for pop. He can do jazzy stuff, and it was because I remember saying we should have or maybe you said it, we should have a live sax player, and we kind of knew we had to have some element of, otherwise it's just me and Tyler staring at each other awkwardly, you know, going but he had messaged us for a while, maybe like a year or so, and every time we were like, it doesn't really make sense, like, we don't really know how to do this, and it can't really justify itself financially. And it was only when he suggested we could do a joint show with FM84, we're like, maybe that would be enough to draw a crowd, and we could use that we could invest in that, and we knew it wasn't going to be a big money maker. We would probably lose some money, but we would see if this thing had legs and if we could do it. And we did it, and Tyler's wife and her sister, you know, came and sold, you know, Anna and Jess sold merch and were in charge of videos.
They ran our video wall.
That was made. We put a call out on socials to have them do videos, and it was really, when I think about it, it was like quite a big operation that we got kind of got running, and with help from the fans and you know, Anna and Jess, and it was just, and then Jesse, our first sax player, who's just a gem of a human, an absolute professional. I think he flew up on his own dime. He had points. He put himself up in a hotel. We were like, we can only pay you this. We have no money. We'll pay you. I think we were like, we can pay you $500. That's that we knew we weren't gonna make any money from that. And he found a hotel and he put himself up, and he was just a gentleman, and he was way too professional to be working with two yokels like Tyler and I. So
True.
yeah, but anyway, that was kind of how it came about. It was after that show, we both went, wow, it sold out. It was like 800 people there or however many, and we were like, well, maybe we could do this in LA. And that's when you, Tyler, said you should meet with my good friend and old manager, Justin, and he lives down the street. Oh, there we go. The Globe. Oh my Lord.
Like, how did it feel to like walk up and see this on the side? The Midnight FM84 sold out in LA.
Surreal. It's surreal. It still is surreal to me. And I remember taking a picture of that. Maybe I took that picture, I don't know. It was weird to be part of the thing that people came to see suddenly. That was like a weird, it still is a little bit surreal to me that anyone knows about our little thing. Yeah.
So would you say that this was the moment that the Midnight became something bigger than just the two of you? Was it these live shows and seeing all these people come out like, wow, you know, this really is something?
I think you could say that for me, at least. The live shows, after the first live show, I think Tyler and I both went, well, this seems to be people, the fact that people would buy a ticket and show up. You know, it's one thing to follow a band on socials and to click buy on, you know, spend $1 on a song on Bandcamp, but to buy a ticket, to drive out to a venue, let alone drive from another state or fly from another country or state, which is insane. I met a person from Japan, flew from Tokyo at our very first show. I mean,
he gave me a headband. It's still on my Kemper case.
Wow,
from the first show.
Mary from the New Kids on the Block fan. Mary was there at the first show in DNA Lounge. I met her there, and it became very real. And I think after, when we said, well, maybe we could do this in LA, we'll repeat the success and try to fill a venue and do this thing with FM84. And that's when Justin got involved. He wasn't officially managing us. It was more like, what is this thing? And he found a bigger venue, and luckily he found a promoter who was willing to take a chance on us. And that sold out as well. And that was like 12 or 1,300 people, I think. And he got a bunch of industry people, booking agents and people at that show. And everyone, including ourselves, were like, we don't know what the fuck this is, but it's something. And that was the beginning of it all.
He set all the industry people together so that they would kind of have, like, look at each other and know. Like, there have only been 2 times in my life where I felt very heavily like, if this goes well, this is destiny, and if it goes badly, this is a door slamming. And the first one was at South by Southwest in 2013 that our manager, actually Justin, was still a part of. And I remember thinking, if this set goes badly, this is another 5 years of like grinding. And it was another 5 years of grinding. But that show at the Globe, everyone was there. I was absolutely terrified because I felt that moment so strongly, and I didn't know that I had what it took to kind of get up on stage and give the performance what it needed. I had serious doubts about my ability to carry it across the line, and so I was in the sub basement doing my breathing and meditation exercises because I was having a nervous breakdown before the set.
Yeah, I remember you were in a very quiet space taking, you know, I felt it. I was very nervous because back then it was like shaking before you go on stage. You're a little uneasy and kind of like, am I going to be able to actually physically play these notes on the keys? Because you like freeze up. and we were both preparing in our own way. And obviously, I knew there was more pressure on Tyler because being the lead singer and all. But Justin said he spent some time with you in the basement, sat with you, and you were like just Tyler's in the basement. He's kind of, he was trying to calm us down or calm you down.
Mm-hmm.
And then we were off to the races. We went on, it's on YouTube. It's like Tyler comes in with his baseball jacket and he throws it out and during shadows, I think. And everyone in the room, the label people, us, went, I don't know what the fuck this is, but it's something. And it was really a kind of to be honest, here's a little confession. Sometimes I'll go on YouTube and find that very first recorded moment from the Globe, not because I'm like digging myself or like, oh my God, we were great, but it's like, wow, to be in it, you're getting a sense of what it must have felt to be in the crowd, getting a sense of people's anticipation and people's connection with this that we didn't know at the time.
Yeah.
But hearing them kind of get excited, being picked up on the mic on their phones or whatever, really gives me more of an appreciation for the level of engagement they had. That for them, it was this thing that they had found and cultivated this fan base, and they were now able to see it live. Whatever we were at the time. And to me, it really gives me an appreciation for the journey that we've been on and that fans have been on, this community, because we can make lots of songs, but if no one connects with them, then it's sort of like still just Tyler and I. So it really is a conversation.
And so one other thing I want to talk about while we're in this sort of 2017 era, and it's is the Midnight Remixed. And a lot of people might think, a remix album, this is just something that you put out in between releases, just some filler, while you're in between release cycles. But this was a lot more than that for a lot of reasons. So the Midnight Remix was the first Midnight album to be associated with a label, Silk Music. It was the first one to appear on the Billboard chart. It was on the Dance Electronics album chart on Billboard, and it was the first album to feature y'all's new logo. The pink.
Oh, wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah, it was, and so I just wanted to talk because this was how I discovered you guys. So how did the Midnight Remix come to be? I'm assuming at some point someone put you in contact with Jacob Henry, or someone else at that label at the time, or.
I think it was. I can't remember if Jacob reached out, how I connected with him. He was also living in, Tyler had moved to New York by then, but I think it was like 2016, and he still lives in Santa Monica, I think. But I can't remember how we connected, but it was via socials somehow. I think he just reached out. It was very very casual. I remember. There he is. He's such a sweetheart. He is one of the loveliest people in the world, and so passionate. That remix album is all credit goes to him.
Absolutely.
He was very intent on, he wanted to take me for a long drive, and we drove around on the PCH and listened to these remixes. And he was, I thought it was great listening to it, but I didn't have the same level of engagement or expectation. But I could tell that he told me all these remixes, all these producers were very excited to kind of remix, that they liked the music. And it was like, this is reaching other people. And, it was just small, wake up calls of someone cares about this. This is connecting somehow. But all that credit goes to Jacob. He put that together. He found he's got a great ear for quality electronic music, and he found all these people, and he would run them by me, and I would give him my input. But really, he spearheaded that. He made it happen.
He did. He coming from folk world, I just had no concept of what house remixes of the Midnight. I had zero context for that. But having known Jacob, I spent an amazing evening in Tokyo with him a few weeks ago with the melodic house producer Shingo. But he's
as
always
as a jet-setting superstar in synthwave world.
yeah.
Ingo
Just
Nakamura is such an amazing producer. I think you played a remix of one of his songs at your DJ show in Atlanta that night was on your set list, because I recognized, I was like, I know what this song is, and I was like, wow, like this kind of
my gosh,
remix.
I forgot that was him. I should have mentioned that.
Yeah, it was
when
like,
I was with him.
It was like the Clay. I don't know if I'm saying his name right. If I'm butchering it, forgive me. It was like the Clay's Frozen remix of Sapporo.
Yeah,
And it was like I hadn't heard this obscure remix before, and Tyler's playing in his DJ set, and I don't know what to feel right now because I'm all in these fields. I hear this song that I know that Tyler's spinning, all these people are dancing to, and it's just the most amazing thing ever. So, you know.
The older you get, I feel like the smaller the world gets, and that is maybe the feeling of heaven. Like every story kind of connecting to every other story. But anyway, the remix is mostly Jacob, and the second remix was Jacob, and that whole world. I feel like Jacob is carrying the torch for the Midnight in an area of the music world that we don't spend a ton of time in. So we love Jacob. Yeah.
And a lot of people don't really know how, I guess, this kind of world works. I know you guys do too, but this is kind of the world I came from. They have these artists and they make all these songs and remixes and they put out these compilations. So it'll be like, Progressive House Essentials Volume 2, 3, or Trance Treasures Volume 1. And the Talamanca remix that We've Moved Forward was put on one of those compilations. And that's how I discovered you guys, because I was a big fan of Talamanca at the time and really into that sort of beachy style of progressive house and more tropical, kind of, spacey feeling. And I just searched Talamanca on Spotify, and I was just wanting to listen to all his remixes, and I heard this one. And it was just kind of surprising to me because a lot of the times the progressive house doesn't have vocals, but when it does have vocals, it's almost always female vocals. It's very rare to hear male vocals in that genre. And so when I heard it, I was like, wow, this sounds so amazing. And I didn't know who the Midnight was yet. So I went to y'all's Spotify page, started listening to y'all's songs, and that's where it started at the end of 2016.
Wow,
that's cool.
So that's why I'm so thankful for the Midnight Remixed and Jacob Henry and what he did, because I know I'm not the only one who discovered you guys this way. I've met several other people who discovered you guys through these remixes that were put out on these compilations. So
yeah, it really introduced us to a whole group of people in the more electronic progressive house world. Deep house. Yeah, it was cool to kind of see us recontextualize in that kind of framework. It was cool.
Right. And another thing that we haven't touched on yet that I would like to talk to is how and when did you guys meet Nikki Flores for the first time?
That's a tough one.
That was through me. I mean, I had written with her many times. She is a brilliant songwriter and vocalist and vocal producer, and she's written and produced for lots of other artists. And so we met in songwriting sessions where you're writing for other people or you're writing songs to then try and pitch them to major label artists. So I knew her from then, and Jason was the first. Jason started. We wrote Jason in the first studio I was working out of in 2014, maybe a couple months before Days of Thunder came out. It was like I was in that 80s groove, and I just said to her, it wasn't intended as a Midnight track. I just said I want to feel like doing something 80s, and I had roughly an idea of kind of, I think a quick idea of the drums, and there's that fast kind of like a little bit of an homage to Maniac by Michael Sembello, and I said, you want to do something with this? And we wrote the verses, and I remember pitching the chorus to her going, this is kind of dumb, but I also think it's kind of fun, ooh, Jason, tell me what you're chasing. And she's like, I like it, that's fun. And that was just a verse and a chorus. Sat there, or verse pre-chorus, sat there for a while, and it wasn't until 2015, the year later, maybe about a year later, that Tyler came to LA and we wrote on, we wrote Endless Summer and Vampires. And I said, I have this thing I did with Nikki, this thing on Nikki Flores. And, I played it and I was like, maybe do you want to like do a duet or whatever, like add, and I played it for Tyler and he's like, sure. And that's kind of how it came about. But yeah, Nikki is kind of, is an artist in her own right, but I met her through the kind of songwriter producer circuit of just co-writing with people.
Yeah, and I remember that first demo of Jason was another one we got during the ARG, because I remember it had the track you would put down for the time, you would later recycle it for the equalizer. And it just,
right.
And
that's totally true. Yeah, right.
Yeah, and it just had her singing that first verse and chorus, and she sung that verse again, and so it was just really cool to hear that.
I think, as I'm remembering it, I think we wrote it over the equalizer beat. I think I ended up at least approaching it like a halftime, like that kind of thing. And then I ended up spinning it off and keeping equalizer as the heavier thing, and then making the track for Jason, which is why they're the same tempo, the same key. So yeah, that's true. I've forgotten about that. Sorry to interrupt.
Oh no, this is what I love. It's just, these old things I discovered over the years, be like, do you remember when this was that, or like when Lonely City was still combined and still had Tyler vocals in it? Because I found an old clip of that, a while ago, where you can still hear Tyler singing Lonely City, and you hadn't applied the effects yet. Because when 2016-17, you were really heavy. I like to call it your social media era, because you were just posting stuff on Instagram constantly, just whether it be vibe posts, whether it be snips of new songs that you were working on. And it was just such a treasure trove. And, right after, around the time of the Midnight Online, the Instagram was wiped. But a few months earlier, I had downloaded the Midnight Instagram. And so I still had all these old clips and photos that you guys had posted. And I just went back and listened to some of these things. And it's just wow to hear how this song started, what it became, and, some stuff that still was never released. And, it's just cool to like think back and, just when this was, because I feel like going back to what you guys were talking about earlier, you had no deadlines yet. So you were in the kitchen cooking constantly. And so, how many demos would you say you put down, or like, because theoretically, like, considered this maybe could go on Endless Summer?
Not even that many. We cut one song, Bend. It wasn't like we're trying to now change this so we can feel more free and just create, but it wasn't like we have 100 songs, we got to narrow it down to 20 or whatever. It was like, these are the songs we chose to focus on, and these are the songs that I chose to, finish. We agreed, like, let's do, okay, I'm gonna work on these. So it wasn't like we had a ton of other, all the snippets and little demo clips were not clips of mostly were not clips of full songs. They were literally an 8-bar idea that I was just working on. I posted that, and then a lot of them don't have. A good example is people keep asking for a track called Death Touch that we played live as a little interlude thing.
I remember that. Yeah.
That track is all that exists. It's not, that intro going into the beat and then it would flow into something else on the tour. That's all there is. There isn't, it's not like a snippet of a larger track. There isn't anymore, which is why it didn't make it on, I think, Monsters. And so it's not like we have a ton of other songs, but Bend was one it was that or Memories, and we were like, Memories feels like a better bookend and more emotional, and we loved Bend, so we felt like at that time it didn't cut it for it was like it felt like a complete statement. And then down the line we released Bend I think we put it on YouTube first or something, and then
Well, so Ben came about when you guys were doing this might bring back some horror flashbacks, but you know, it did come out was when you guys did the key rates pressing of Endless Summer on vinyl.
Yeah. Right. Bane of my existence at the time.
Yeah, and so you know, you guys were like, hey, you know, if you pre-order this album on vinyl, we'll include this as like a digital bonus track. And then you guys didn't upload it to YouTube, someone else did. And so that's how, and I guess you guys were like, okay, we're not going, you know, because maybe you might with copyright strike it or something, because maybe this song was only meant to be for people who pre-ordered the vinyl, but it stayed up there. That's how a lot of people knew, and that's how a lot of people were begging, you know, wanted like, oh, this song should come out one day. And so that's when, you know, in 2021, when you guys decided to reissue Endless Summer, and you also included Comet, which is quite a song. I remember UT's comment on Facebook back in 2016, and it was just like 20 seconds. And, you know, it was just one of those things. We heard it, we liked it so much, and we're like, we want this, we want this, we want this. And I think that's kind of the challenge when you're putting out these clips and stuff, probably, is that, you know, people will listen to it. I'm so guilty of this, you know, listen to, get attached to it, and then, well, you know, maybe it's not the time for this song. Maybe I don't want to put this out yet. Maybe this is just will forever be a sketch and nothing more. And so I'm sure that's something that's fans we struggle with, because we hear these songs, we want them all. You could go to full Taylor Swift and release a 30-song album, we would look for it. But I remember you telling me one time, it's just like, you know, sometimes that's just not the best way to make music, because you were like, you can put out 20 tracks, but I bet you only a few of them will actually be really good. And so you really have to kind of curate what you put out there and stuff. So
yeah, it's more about what are you trying to say. And yeah, you're right, you can write 100 songs and are they all just as good? Probably not, and that's fine. I think we've become a lot, especially me, you know, making the tracks, and kind of become a lot more conservative about posting, because now if you post a snippet, you have to know, or not know, but you have to at least feel like this will see the light of day somehow. You have to be ready to follow up on that, because otherwise, if you're posting really early ideas flippantly, you're suddenly, I just remember how many messages we'll get about, you know, when is this coming out? And I was like, never, because it's not even a full idea. And so, but they don't know that, obviously. So yeah, we're a little bit more cautious about what we put out there, because now suddenly there's a whole level of different set of expectations.
Yeah, because there was one clip you posted one time that it was you singing, and it was called "She Was Dreaming of Boys." Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah,
I'll
tell you what, that's all that exists. That's all that exists to that song too. It has a couple more ideas in it, but I don't really know what that is. It's not a full song, and it's one of those. That was really meant before I met Tyler. That was more like, oh, that will be my little solo project as I Am Data, and then like got left by the wayside. Still like it.
And that's when, you know, and when we get to the Heroes era, that's when you started streaming the creation of songs on Twitch, which I'm sure is something you have a lot of feelings about, seeing how people, what they maybe did with the things they heard on Twitch. But I specifically remember one song you were working on Twitch that has not been released yet. But it was called Jazz Idea, and except there was no A in idea, it was IDE, and Jazz had about 4 Z's in it, and it was.
I remember. Oh, that was
that Pacific Blue? Is that what that came?
That's a different one.
Anima?
Yeah, I think it's the one that I did with Oliver on the bass. I think.
To me, it came across as sort of like a down-tempo, Quiet Storm version of America Online. Is really what I felt it was. And I just remember because it had these sort of Seinfeld theme song style slaps to it.
Yeah.
And you were working on this on Twitch, and you were just improvising these keys. Like, these keys weren't on the track, you were just playing them. And it sounded so good, and it just sounded like Office Wave or Late Night at the Office.
Office Wave, I love it. Yeah.
And so I just remember like, man, I really wish this would come out someday, but you know, if it doesn't, it doesn't. If it does, it does. And I remember it had this little shimmery synth part to it that just kept repeating in the background. And
I know exactly which one you're talking about.
A couple of weeks ago, you previewed a song on Twitter from what I assume is the next upcoming album, and it was when there's footage of Syndicate, the video game, playing in the background, and that shimmery synth part, you've added it to that song. And so
I remember doing something like that, and I don't remember what track that was and what shimmery. I know the shimmery thing. It's like a guitar.
It is a da-da-da-da-da-da, and it just, you know, it's really quick and just a descending part, and it's just it was a repeated motif. But it was just so cool when you started to stream songs on Twitch and just really getting like, wow, like this is how making music works. Like you change your mind all the time, and you're constantly making changes, and you know that was just a really cool time. And because that was during, you know, the COVID era, when, you know, you had released, you know, you couldn't really tour as much, and so this was just kind of a way of like keeping the fans engaged with showing them the new music that you're working on. And you started doing it again, and it's just really nice to see that you decided to start doing it a little bit again.
Yeah, I don't, to be honest, I don't know how much I'll be doing it more, because I did it because I was like, oh, I'll jump on Twitch. It was late at night, I was working, I'm feeling creative, but it's always a double-edged sword, because, you know, a lot of our, basically on Heroes, we did a deal with the Twitch back then, and they wanted more music producers and content creators on Twitch, so it wasn't just gamers. But I personally think if you are not someone who makes their money via like streaming your music creation on Twitch, then it's this double-edged sword, because you end up with all of the fan base having heard most of the album before it comes out, and maybe even in our case, a lot of demos of the early demos strung together on YouTube in like a year or 6 months before the album drops, and it's like unfinished versions. And so I don't know how much more I'll do it. I remember when I streamed, maybe that was like a month ago or a couple of weeks ago, I remember the next morning just going directly and deleting the streams, because I knew otherwise they'd probably find their way to YouTube, which bums me out. And that's sort of like a shame, because I love the sharing component, but I don't like that now that just lives, and people will now have also a different set of expectations of, why'd you change the drum sound on that? I love that thing. And it's like, then your process doesn't is no longer your own. And if there's anything we want is to maintain what it is we're trying to say or we're trying to do.
Well, we're giving the songs to the fans, but we want to give it to them when they're ready. The fans should have the respect, our respect, you know, to prepare the meal when it's ready, and not, you know, be part of the process from the first ingredient. Because I mean that we make music. That's what we do. So they should run with it once it's out. It's just that's what we, I don't know what I'm trying to say.
It's once it's a complete thought, right? Once you know that you've got it all ready to be served, then you want to present it. But when it's like a half idea and you're still milling about and you're still figuring out, why doesn't this chorus work, or why does this drums doesn't seem to, or like these chords, it's like, then you could just share anything. Then what's the point of finishing anything, right?
Right, that's right.
You're trying to get it to a place to express an emotion, and that for that to be a complete thought, and that takes work, where the craft comes in.
That's right. It elevates it above mere content to something that aspires to art. Yeah.
What's that?
And so, Tim, you also, when you started posting more on social media again, you know, with this upcoming release cycle, I guess, if you will, you teased that you might be singing another song again. Is that true?
Maybe, yeah. Maybe there's a little thing with my vocals on it. Yeah.
Yeah, so I just, you know, said you had recorded, you know, lyrics or vocals, and I was like, you know, ooh, you know, that sounds intriguing. So...
See, the cycle begins again.
Yeah, and once again, you put it out there, so you know fans are going to be expecting it. So
I never seem to learn somehow.
Yeah. But yeah, I'm really excited. What you shared so far sounds really amazing, and it's just really cool to see what's coming. So, are you still working on this next album, or is it finished, or like what's the current status?
we're still cracking away. We're still creating, and it's coming along really nicely. But we're both like, I think we really want this next outing to be the best it can be. I think we're at a place in the journey of the band where we know what it is, but we're also kind of exploring where it can go and how it can grow, and it's an exciting time. But we're also feeling the pressure of wanting to. I think there's a certain element of coming home to maybe the more of an electronic space, which is really fun. But then how do you grow that? Because otherwise you could just make Nocturnal Part 2 and it all sounds like that, and we could do that, and that's fine, but it doesn't seem like really
there's no necessity to it.
Yeah, very, very much so. So we're exploring and we're having fun, and we are also making a bunch of stuff and going, well, that was fun, but is it good enough? No, maybe not. Maybe we take the core idea and we keep churning at it. And so we're still cracking away.
10 years is an interesting spot to be, because it's now our day job. It now has lots of stakes attached to it. It's a big team. Everyone on the team, it's consequential if the record does well or does poorly. And we obviously, as artists want to put our best foot forward and do what we do excellently. There are some things to be gained, many things to be gained in just kind of throwing stuff against the wall and seeing what sticks. But there's also a level of kind of a polish and professionalism that we aspire to make the best record that we've ever made. And I think that we finally, with as many projects as we've had under our belt, we've cooked a lot of different meals. We now have, I think, the ingredients in our kitchen to make something like truly special. And I think our dilemma now is do we put it out now, or do we keep tinkering it to see if we can make it even better?
Right, and I feel like that's a challenge. Is sometimes knowing like, when is the song finished, when is it not. I don't know, Tim, if you can say, like, if you go back and listen to some of y'all's older music, what if I done this differently? What if I put this here instead of there, added this part, or maybe not leave this part in? And I'm sure that's probably a struggle for the artist, sometimes, but
it's just part of the process. But for me, I tend to put a lot of thought and a lot of time into trying. I feel like producing is just making a ton of mistakes until you choose all the right things, and you don't. For me, at least, I feel like I'm always starting from scratch every single time, and because you can't just port over like, well, this thing worked on that song, so we just do that again, and you can do that for maybe a couple of ideas, but then that gets old to you. You just get bored with your own process or your own repeating the thing that worked, and that gets boring to the listener. And you have to keep exploring and have fun. So once it's finished, for me, I'm very confident in this is the best I could make it. This is what I had with what we created. I don't tend to go back and go, if I only. I mean, I've made mistakes where I go, like, literally, I'll tell you, in Monsters, the track for Monsters, I was exploring this is very nerdy, but there's a sub bass, there's a sub sine bass underneath the kick drum in the choruses, in the drops. And I was trying out which octave, like, is it the higher bass that sits higher in the mix, or is it the lower note that is more like you don't hear it, but you feel it? And I was trying, each chorus had one high octave and one low octave. And I forgot to move the high one. I settled on the low octave. And on the second drop, it's the low octave, which sounds better, but the first drop has the higher octave. And you don't hear it so much as you feel it in how the kick kind of punches through, and that forever will bug me, and it's just how it is. I also was bummed out that I chose to not repeat the chorus a last time in America 2 in the very ending when we have the
That song is still to this day my favorite The Midnight song. I look back at the Kids album and think that's still one of the best albums y'all put out. I think that's some of Tyler's best lyrics he's ever written on that whole album. And everyone was like, "Oh, there's no sax, boo!" And then it's just like, you gotta look past that because someone please listen to those songs and tell me one of them where a saxophone would sound right. And the answer is none of them. And it's just, but yeah, America. I'm glad you wanted America too, because that's just such an amazing song. Like,
I spent a long time on that track because I wanted to get it right. I was trying to hit an Americana thing while still keeping it in that very synthetic sort of produced world. But yeah, that last chorus, it was out, and I remember saying to Justin and going, I should have doubled that chorus up so you have the chorus with the bridge part on top of each other, and they're like countering each other. And I remember actually maybe a couple of years ago opening the session and trying it and actually going, no, I made the right call. This is it's not as clean as I thought. But part of me is still like, ooh, I could have squeezed a little bit more catchiness out of that chorus. But you make your choices.
It's interesting to think about how America 2 was a bit of a precursor to a big part of Heroes, like how those are kind of related, how that kind of opened.
Souvenir reminds me of a lot of America 2, and Souvenir is one of my favorite songs on Heroes. So yeah, because I remember once again, memory. You were working on Souvenir on Twitch one time. And you were I think you had sort of imported or was playing the riff, that backing riff from America 2 while you were working on it. And I don't think you ended up keeping it, but it just sounded so good. And I remember hearing the violin from the Casio ZZ-1000 for the first time. We were working on it, and I instantly
Wait, how do you know that's that sound? Did I say that, or are you just that good that you can like
I just remembered. And I just remember here. I hadn't even heard any of the rest of the song yet, and that was when it still had vocoder vocals in it from Tyler, and those were still on the track. And I just remember hearing that violin part, and it was just, I fell in love with that song instantly. I hadn't even heard the rest of it yet, and I was just, once again, that's sort of like the good things that come out of when you were streaming those songs on Twitch. And so. Yeah, just something I've always really appreciative of, because you might just think, oh, this is a little part in the song, but I heard that and just loved it, because how do you take a song like Souvenir, Verb from Tyler, and you transform it into the Midnight, and that's how you do it. You added little parts like that, and it just sounded so amazing. And so I'm always so thankful for that.
Thank you so much, Tim. It means a lot.
Yeah, and so. But I've kept you guys for almost an hour and a half, and I know you probably got a lot of things to do. There's a lot more I wanted to talk about, but we're not gonna. You guys just really pivoted the conversation for most of it, which is what I love. You guys just naturally segued into a lot of the things I was wanting to talk about. So,
well, you did a great job hosting. So, for what it's worth,
thank you, Timothy.
No, absolutely. It's a joy to work on the Midnight Wiki and sort of like archive y'all's history, and just
all that.
Let's not forget where this whole thing started. Let's always keep sort of memories of that. And and one thing I will also say, I know a lot of us are so appreciative on how often you guys release things, because it's 10 years and you guys have put out so much, and that's not easy to do. I don't think a lot of people realize that the amount of volume y'all put out. Like, we never go too long without something from the Midnight, whether it be like an album, a remix album. You drop Cold Pizza on YouTube, that random February in 2021. It's just, we never go too long without something. And that's just so awesome, and something I just know a lot of us are so appreciative of. So
Thank you,
great. Thank you so much, Timothy.
Right. And so wrapping up, what do you see the future of the Midnight as being? Like, what do you want to keep doing? Is there anything that you haven't done yet as a Midnight that you would like to do, or just, just looking, and I know this is really hard to do, but just what do you think the future of the Midnight is at this point?
Honestly, I think we're trying I think we're moving into a new phase of the Midnight. We've said that a few times internally, but I truly think we are. We know what we are, but we're also growing, and it needs to grow. And I think we're both excited about collaborating more with people and trying to open up that, just getting more creative ideas, that so it's not such an insular process. Because that's fun, and we will always have that, but it's also really fun working with people that bring something new to the table. And I think we're both really excited about moving into the next phase and putting out this next album, whatever that ends up being. And
the multimodal, you know, the graphic novel, the co-headline tour for the first time. You know, we would love to,
ride, all those things.
Yeah, that's right. The the Midnight Karaoke Night franchise.
Yes.
No, this is we want a bigger tent to tell the story, and we want more voices in it, because it becomes more interesting that way, and it keeps it fresh for both of us, I think.
Absolutely.
Whenever the last train roller coaster ride opens, I'll be the first in line. So
Last train, and it's just a train to
it just what is like. So as we're celebrating 10 years of Days of Thunder and just 10 years of putting out music, what's the last, any just sort of a parting message you'd like to give to all the fans that have been with you guys all these years?
Huge thank you thank you for giving us so much grace. You know, we've been given a lot of grace for trying to learn this as you go. There really isn't any way to know this stuff before doing it, so you kind of have to learn on the job. So we've received a lot of grace. Yeah.
I would also like to say a thank you for the tone of the community. Everyone is so open and receptive, and when there are angry or bitter or cynical voices, like there's kind of a dog pile on them to be like, hey, this is a community that uplifts, and that's one of the most I don't know that Tim or I did anything specific to have that happen. Like it's just been a positive community of searchers like Tim and I are. So we're very grateful for that as well. It feels the community feels solid. It feels like something that's worth preserving and holding on to. So we're especially grateful for that.
I'm very proud of it. Not that we created that, but proud to be part of a community that people that, like Tyler said, we have no control over that. Like that's you guys. You are the community. We bring whatever we have to the table, but you guys complete that circle. And so very, very thankful and proud to be part of that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, well, thank you guys so much for agreeing to do this. Like I said, I've met both of you several times. It's always been gracious to meet you guys, but I just have been wanting to sit down and have a conversation like the one we just had. And, this just felt like the right time to do it with Days of Thunder 10 years anniversary coming up. So thank you both again. And we're looking forward to what comes next for the Midnight.
Same. Right, we should do this again next, after the next album comes out. We should do it.
Oh, absolutely. I would love to do that for sure.
Awesome.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Timothy.
Thank you, guys.
All right. Bye.
See you guys.
Bye.